The aim of this presentation is to apply the strategies of mosaic art to audiovisual translation in order to show how significantly the social impact of this specific field of translation would benefit from adopting a perspective focusing on the point of intersection between the academic and professional sectors. So basically, I will reflect on the question, how can academic research on audiovisual translation feed into practice and encourage both development and change? This question is crucial for the development of meaningful research that can be of true value to the entire community involved in the audiovisual translation process. However, attempts to answer it have been scarce as they rest on two challenging and intertwined issues. The first issue is to fully understand the needs and expectations of the many different actors involved in the process, and to encourage communication amongst these actors. The second issue is to devise strategies aimed not only at boosting the already existing research, but above all at popularizing and disseminating its results. The talk aims to address these delicate issues with a view to the advancement of research in the social sciences generally, and also in the specific field of audiovisual translation. It comprises two sections. The first, more theoretical one, is subdivided into two subsections presenting a series of reflections both on the importance of encouraging networks and research partnerships between academia and the professional sectors, and on the fact that a fair amount of collaboration does in fact already exist. However, as the latter has not proved to be sufficient for yielding more profitable results, the way ahead probably lies in the more widespread dissemination of research findings. The second, more practical section of the talk will propose an action plan aimed at offering a handful of suggestions on how to kickstart the implementation process for the improvements and changes identified as desirable in the first section of the talk. So here we go, section 1. In some scientific areas, such as medicine, for instance, a third alternative paradigm has recently emerged between the dichotomous ends of pure and applied research and has grown into a separate research field, translational research. That is, scientific research that aims to make findings from basic research instantly useful for practical applications. This section will consider how this paradigm may be fruitfully applied to research on audiovisual translation in order to make it translational and increase its social impact. Firstly, I focus on how this research currently seems to affect the surrounding community and on how this may be achieved to a more significant degree in the near future if properly challenged. Then an action plan is devised with a view to improving its outreach by engaging with the non-experts, that is, with the public at large. As the primary purpose of this action plan is to provide the non-experts with a resource and make its results useful to them, I will now analyze the issues identified in the introduction in greater detail. Issue 1. One of the two issues in addressing the question of how to channel academic research on audiovisual translation into practice is understanding the needs and the expectations of the many different actors involved in the audiovisual translational process. Though it may seem paradoxical, such needs and expectations are not, at present, always fully clear to all academics, or they're not properly taken into account by them. Despite now focusing mostly on descriptive rather than prescriptive prescriptive aspects of translation studies, some scholars still choose to linger along the branch of pure research. They discuss often specialized micro aspects of the translation activity, shedding light on the production and interpretation stages of translation in newer, more informative ways than ever before. However, they often fail to take into account the process as a whole, let alone consider the legitimate expectations of most end users. In short, although the practical application of research seems to be acquiring greater importance in some countries, many researchers still appear to lose sight of the fact that the move from a theoretical process to tangible practice is not only long overdue, but must necessarily generate benefits for the whole community involved and bring about widespread social change. In relation to the specific field of audiovisual translation, Diaz Cintas has long emphasized some academics' elitist interest in film research only. Things are gradually changing, but some researchers still concentrate exclusively on prestigious cultural products, and within such products, exclusively on the linguistic dimension. Writing from the other extreme of the translation process, Sánchez also hopes for greater cooperation between academic institutions and industry, though it is worth stressing here that experts from within the profession do seem to recognize that individualism and self-referencing are challenges that need to be addressed in the production stage. The autoreferentiality of the academic world at large, that is, the tendency to compulsively refer to itself when it comes to research, is a well-known phenomenon. However, this would appear to happen to a lesser extent in the field of audiovisual translation than elsewhere, probably also due to the nature of the AVT process, which includes aspects that are not strictly linguistic or theory-based, but it is still an undeniable fact. And yet, what is nowadays commonly referred to as cross-fertilization or cross-pollination, that is, interactions aimed at knowledge transfer between different communities in order to become mutually beneficial and productive, is obviously a crucial issue. And this has long been a tenet amongst the most enlightened researchers on audiovisual translation. As Denton and Ciampi remind us, members of the mostly dubbing professions have been involved right from the outset in the debate on screen translation in Italy. Dubbing scriptwriters, dubbing directors, and dubbing actors, and more recently subtitling companies have been a characterizing feature of the Forlì conferences. Forlì has a strong tradition of studies on audiovisual translation. So there have been a feature of these Forlì conferences over the years, and professionals have also been invited to work side by side with academics in training programs organized at university level. Italy being a dubbing rather than a subtitling country, the focus has understandably been mostly on dubbing. Finally, to open up a wider perspective, it is also worth mentioning the valuable function of the European Association for Studies in Screen Translation, which operates at an international level thanks to the members it has attracted from all over the world. As for the possible areas of practical academic intervention within the specific subsector of research and subtitling, Diaz Cintas mentions studies on the reception of subtitles to establish the appropriate reading speed, the easiest conventions, and again, making reference to Italy, the issue of target audience perception is a research aspect in which Forlì academics have always excelled. Researchers at Forlì have in fact also attempted to recreate actual work conditions in the training courses they have organized over the years, while focusing on hands-on practice in audio description and re-speaking for the visually or acoustically impaired. So summing up, The encouragement of networks and research partnerships between academia and the professional sector is undoubtedly one of the keys to promote communication and cross-pollination amongst the different actors in the audiovisual translation process. And yet, despite a fair amount of collaboration already happening, something is still missing if such partnerships are to work more fruitfully. Second issue, devising strategies aimed at boosting already existing research, but above all at popularizing research. The missing something may be the capacity to fully understand the average person's needs, as well as the inability to assimilate academic and professional contributions due to a lack of proficiency in the other's jargon. The most effective way to translate research findings into practical improvements and end-user benefits may be the full recognition that research on audiovisual translation can offer social trickle-down effects through a detailed analysis of the audience's real needs and expectations. Furthermore, the gradual popularization of audiovisual translation criticism is undoubtedly crucial to ensuring its dissemination amongst all the stakeholders and consequently cross-pollination. Cross-pollination. The dignity of translation as an autonomous text, valid in itself and endowed with its own characteristics, has been fully recognized, in line with the general direction of translation studies ever since the 1970s. However, many translation scholars have pointed out that it is also crucial to develop a form of criticism specific to it. Despite its existence in the form of judgments on the quality of translated texts from the 17th century on, and I'm quoting Berman here, translation criticism has not undergone the same development as what we commonly refer to as literary criticism. That is criticism of source texts. In actual fact, it is barely existent, and therefore it is still in search of what Berman calls a dignification. This gap may be linked to widespread lack of status of translated text as such, which also raises crucial educational issues, and the references to Venuti here. However, audiovisual translation criticism is far better developed than literary translation criticism. The real challenge in this area of translation studies may be to realize that recognition of the existence of an already developed field of audiovisual translation criticism is only the first step in the process of making research on translation translational. Since in most cases, the language used in research is not directly accessible to the average end user or even to the professional. The other point is that academic research is normally made available via channels that do not allow for wide circulation. The systems used by academia to evaluate research and make decisions about career advances should probably be listed among the main obstacles to the integration of research into practice. The quality of each individual researcher's contribution to the scientific community they belong to is at present primarily measured against the number of books, refereed and peer-reviewed journal articles produced, and the number of citations received in other academic publications. This all favors the further development and progressively wider use of both the specific community's jargon and the theoretical foundations used as references, which risks making academic research over-specialized. As a result, the information is often hardly accessible even to researchers from close areas of study without prior academic preparation. Moreover, only rarely are academic book-length studies and journals made visible to the public at large, and they are mostly accessible via payment only, although this may be slowly changing, as we know. A third and probably even more challenging question is that since audiovisual translation is a disciplinary area within the social sciences, it mostly relies on empirical approaches, which are often not looked upon with the same consideration as the experimental scientific methodologies on which the hard sciences are based. A possible way out of this problem, which seriously limits the outreach of research in the social field at present, is to raise the scientific community's awareness of the fact that research in the social field has practical trickle-down effects, just like scientific research. And therefore, to encourage the researchers' interaction with the community at large by practically recognizing their impact on the real world. To briefly sum up the assumptions behind the action plan, which I'm about to present. Number one, the creation of partnership partnerships among different stakeholder groups is a necessary but not sufficient condition to make research translational. The other point is that such partnerships should aim at clearly identifying the practical trickle-down effect of the specific research area, making the different key players develop a common language, and popularizing the results of research. This may significantly contribute to making all research, not just audiovisual translation research, meaningful to all stakeholders. In the section I'm about to present, I will make an attempt at fine-tuning these aims to the specific target of the audiovisual translation sector, while devising an action plan for the implementation of the changes proposed. So here we come. In order to clearly identify the practical effects of research on audiovisual translation and at the same time develop a truly common language, it is first of all necessary to give a voice to those stakeholders who should actually benefit from the research. This may be achieved through the organization of focus groups, that is, unstructured interviews conducted by trained moderators in which groups of end users are asked about their perceptions, opinions, expectations, beliefs, and attitudes towards audiovisual translation products. The natural, unstructured pattern of the interview would in itself be a guarantee of the respondents' freedom of self-expression. Due to their very nature as exploratory instruments of people's ideas in public settings, focus groups provide more meaningful data to identify aspects of the issues in question than traditional research tools. Unlike highly structured questionnaires, focus groups allow researchers to discover and investigate the diversity of the surveyed participants' experiences and expectations, rather than merely counting the number of participants sharing the same characteristics. Moreover, such groups are an invaluable tool when it comes to producing ideas. As Lindlof and Taylor maintain, the members are stimulated by the ideas and experiences expressed by each other. What occurs is a kind of chaining or cascading effect. Talk links to or tumbles out of the topics and expressions preceding it. This may be the necessary step to creating a meaningful direction for research initiatives. It would help initiate a reflective process at the academic level aimed at identifying the actual social effects of research, that is, the effects that are actually perceived as such by those who should benefit from it. Focus groups would help researchers to gain participants, that is, insiders' observations and knowledge, and reciprocally, the end users could tap the academics' in-depth knowledge of the environment in order to help those working on audiovisual translation implementation to develop strategies to fine-tune it to real-world needs and thus effectively meet end users' expectations, for example, in terms of ease of access. The additional, probably invaluable benefit of focus groups is that participants in such events seem to naturally develop a common language to describe similar experiences. This may be regarded as the end user's own native language, which each of them has helped to create in order to make sense of the issue at hand. This native language should then both coalesce and contend with specialized jargon in order to produce first an interlanguage and then gradually a proper common language that all stakeholders would feel to be their own. Last but not least, since focus groups are often used for marketing reasons in the early stages of product development and looked upon as precious tools for discussing and or testing the potentialities of new products before they are made available to the public, the use of such instruments of investigation in lieu of more traditional ones may help ease communication between academia and industry and increase the opportunities for attracting funding to research. Page 3. Audiovisual translation criticism could be divided with good approximation into academic and journalistic criticism. Journalistic criticism covers the consumer-oriented reviews that regularly appear in newspapers, magazines, and other mass media, recommending certain products rather than others, and subtly orient public response and taste. Academic criticism involves the papers and book-length studies informed by theory and published in academic journals, volumes, the ones I mentioned before, and that we all know. These are commonly labeled as criticism proper when compared and contrasted with reviews, as they entail in-depth analysis and judgment rather than superficial review and market-oriented advice. That is, of course, as far as mainstream criticism is concerned. The upsurge of blogs, forums, and websites in general, which are often the layperson's only way to evaluate any audiovisual translation product, should also be mentioned, and that would expand this talk far beyond its original scope. One way to ensure circularity and cross-pollination in the flux of exchanges between the various stakeholders in the translation process would be the creation of a continuum between these extremes in the form of serious, that is, reliable popularizations. An example might be reviews. Though they do not contain any explicit references to theory and consequently do not deserve the label of criticism as described, just a few minutes ago, reviews are actually soundly informed by theory. The problem with existing reviews is that those that can actually be labeled as such mostly tend to ignore the fact that they are dealing with translated products. Films are reviewed as if they had been produced in the target language. This is often due to newspaper and magazine editors' uninformed views. There are a few exceptions which should be encouraged, but they only contain the seeds of developments yet to come. It should probably be the task of academics, so our task, to raise newspaper and magazine editors' awareness of the trickle-down effects of high-quality reviews on their readers' level of education and intercultural views. Indeed, academics should educate editors to select reviewers with the right sensitivity and interest, as well as hosting academic researchers on a regular basis, as they do with other areas of studies, such as health, IT, and general science, for example. Although well known mostly only to academics, research notes are discussion notes aimed at providing food for thought. They introduce novel ideas and or advance arguments in favor of a specific theory or methodology in academic journals. If these notes were introduced into the more popular type of publications, they may not only prove to be an invaluable storehouse of ideas, as they already are in academic journals, but they could also function as a crucial driving force for the cross-pollination of such ideas and education of the public at large. I would now like to consider what shape this prospective popularized audiovisual translation criticism may take. To do so, I will make a quick reference to Thompson and Bordwell's work, which emphasizes the advantages of close reading or frame-by-frame attention to detail. Thompson informs us that the possibility of using short clips as illustrations in an article or book is very promising, especially once electronic textbooks get past the trial stages. She convincingly argues that digital technologies currently allow us to engage in a direct form of criticism which bypasses traditional written criticism. Advancing an argument through pieces of video content rather than via written essays may indeed prove to be a more effective form of audiovisual translation criticism, if nothing else, because it uses the very structure and language of film to discuss this issue. This means adopting an approach that involves an alignment of the process and the content of learning as a form of loop input. Now, to sum up, this talk has attempted to address the issue of linking up academic research on audiovisual translation with its effects both on real life and on development and change in the field. The starting point has been that in order to attain a social impact and be of value to the entire community participating in the audiovisual translation process as a whole, from production to consumption, two issues should be addressed before any other. The necessity to come to a full understanding of the needs and demands of the whole range of actors, whose mutual communication should be promoted using all means, and the need to identify strategies capable of both fostering research in its present form and popularizing it with the aim of disseminating its results. Focusing on such issues in comparison to similar research in the social sciences and to research in other areas of the translation spectrum, audiovisual translation research already shows a good degree of communication, cooperation, and influence, at least amongst some of the actors involved in the process and on the community at large. However, its impact would certainly be wider if the existing cooperation properly channeled were to become even more significant in the near future. To this end, I suggest 3 stages of action to show how, in practice, research on audiovisual translation may improve its outreach and engage with the non-experts more productively and make its results more directly useful to them. Stages 1 and 2 focus on the targets of developing a common language and identifying the practical effects of audiovisual translation research. Stage 3 concentrates on how the results of research could be made accessible to the public at large. Thank you very much for your attention.